life, if you make your plan and say, I'm giving myself a month to figure this out and I'm out of here, I'm saving up some money, I'm going to do the next right thing, you're going to be okay. You will find a way. Whether that's having to take the bus to work and be on a bus for 5 hours each way, whether that's having to save up your pennies and make it work, whether that's having to eat top ramen like all of us had to do at 19,
Yep.
For a few years in college, whatever you got to do, you're going to make it. But I want to see you take that brave step forward.
And I would add, anticipate making mistakes.
That's right.
You're going to.
You're going
to make mistakes because that's how we learn.
That's right.
I'm still making mistakes on my income taxes.
Oh, there's
and
that.
you know what? I learned a valuable lesson. I will not make that mistake again. But that's part of growing up. That's part of learning. You're not going to be perfect. You're going to make some really stupid decisions, and that's okay. But that's how we grow.
That's right. So don't be afraid. Now, if you are in a situation, again, we don't know all the elements of this. It's possible that you're in a situation that it's just not actually possible.
True.
For you to exit right now, or to whatever extent. There's elements we don't understand. If you're trying to cope with a reality where you're with a person like that. Now, Nick said something earlier because you say this person has mental illness. Sometimes people just throw that word around. Sometimes they mean no, literally, that person's been diagnosed with bipolar, and some of these behaviors kind of line up with that kind of diagnosis. It becomes interesting because I usually want to see you engage a person. I usually want to see you talk to them. I want to see you share with them. I feel like this whenever you speak to me like that. I feel hurt and I feel wounded. And being able to use those feeling words to get it across, that way you can start to draw these boundaries. And even asserting yourself and saying, when you talk to me like this, I'm going to exit the conversation, and I'm not going to be cruel about it, and I'm not going to be, silly about it, I'm not going to be childish about it, but I'm not available for conversations that sound like this. I'm not available to be spoken to this way, Mom. You need to see me as an adult now. I'm 19, and I know we got to transition. We got to change our relationship. I'm not your child. I'm always going to be your child, but I'm not. I'm now your adult child, and that has to look different than it used to. And so I want to see you stand up for yourself and make some assertions and draw what we call boundaries. And a boundary is when we teach somebody how we need to be treated in order to continue the relationship or in order to continue the version of the relationship that we have. And then I'm imposing a consequence when that boundary is violated, imposing some kind of a sanction or a consequence or a result, whether that's I withdraw from the relationship or I'm not available for it, or whatever. I want that to be something that you begin to experiment with, because if you are stuck there for any further measure of time, we are going to have to sharpen some of these skills so that you can be successful with it. So I want to see you do that.
I agree. I think setting good, healthy boundaries is going to be necessary, and it's kind of your way of just making it clear, like, this is not tolerable behavior, and you have the ability to exit that situation.
Yeah. Great question.
Thank you for writing in.
Yes, and hang in there. And you know what? Don't be afraid to try. You're 19. The world is a big place. I know it's scary, but you're going to be okay. It gets better. And I want you to remember that. When you're 19 years old, you might not know that yet, but let me tell you, it gets better, okay? Hang in there. It's going to be all right.
All right. So let's move on to the last part of the show.
Oh, here we go.
Patreon reviews.
Oh, God.
Or Patreons and reviews.
Yeah.
So the apologies section, I guess I can just take a break because I've got nothing to apologize for.
Yeah.
What would you like to say, Jim?
Oh, Lord. All right. So we get lots of letters. Sometimes people write in with, hey, here's our questions and here's some thoughts. Sometimes people write in with commentary, and sometimes we'll read that on air, or sometimes we'll write them back and say, hey, good point, and we just have a conversation. But we got some mail this week, and so we kind of set records in email responses, and the thing that everybody has in common is Jim is controversial. So, all right, so I'm going to take my lumps. I decided I want to read this letter in its entirety in the show because I don't want to be the kind of person who avoids being critical about myself or receiving criticism. So Nick, Nick is smiling at me, enjoying every second of this. He's enjoying his pound of flesh. But Nick, I've decided to be a good role model for our listeners and demonstrate how to take criticism and to receive that. So
you have the floor.
Oh, God, here we go. All right, so this letter comes in from Ulrich G. And Ulrich G writes, I've been listening to Pod Therapy since your Jock versus Nerd on Ice Cream Social.
Thank you for listening, by the way.
Thank you for listening. This week, I'm writing to call out Jim. Last week, episode 36, a listener wrote in for advice in setting boundaries and clarifying a relationship with a guy who wants more than friendship with a woman who doesn't. Early in the conversation, Jim says that there are 3 mistakes the listener could make, and number 1 is shutting him down hard. Jim explains that the reason some women do this is because some men don't listen and will keep right on pushing and pushing and pushing. And even though the listener describes the more subtle and polite things she's done to try to persuade the guy, Jim doesn't think it's okay for a woman to take a shot at a guy who wants more from her than she's willing to give. This would seem like much more reasonable advice if Jim hadn't suggested just the opposite when the tables were turned. In episode 9, a male listener asked for advice on moving a relationship forward out of the friend zone when the woman doesn't seem interested. In that case, Jim recommended negging. For those who don't know, negging is an act of emotional manipulation whereby a person makes a deliberate backhanded compliment or otherwise flirtatious remark to another person to undermine their confidence and increase their need of the manipulator's approval. Dude, seriously? Yes, you tried to redefine negging as something less toxic than it really is when you defined it in the episode, but that doesn't change the fact that your advice for men is just keep pushing those boundaries, and if being nice doesn't work, be a little meaner, while your advice to women is don't be mean when setting those boundaries. I think you can do better, Jim. Oh, it hurts.
So,
it hurts.
All right, G.
Yeah.
I would just like to reply. I think you are 100% right on
Damn
everything
it, except
for one thing.
Okay.
There's one thing that I disagree with the writer.
Okay.
At the very
that I'm
end,
better than this?
Yes. At the very end, the writer puts that you can do better than this, Jim. I disagree. I think this is Jim at his best.
You go to hell. All right. I am going to reply to this. So the first thing I want to say is this. Ulrich is one of my favorite people on Twitter. And I think that this critical email, it's criticism, it's well-intended criticism. You know, I receive this not as hate mail. I receive this as, hey, I'm sincerely a listener, and I found this to be incongruent and inconsistent, and I don't like it, and I'm calling it out. You know, I want to see you do better than this. So I take it as a positive. But it was hard, Nick. It was hard for me to get because honestly, I really like Ulrich. Like we're Twitter buddies and like we like all the same stuff and we're always commenting on each other's stuff. And it was hard because I was like, oh man, you know, I really thought this person thought I was awesome. And you know, maybe they still like me, but you know, they have some critical. So that was hard to receive. I'm going to mostly take my lumps on this. But I do want to reply just, you know, not with my defense, but just a little bit. I want you to understand something that whenever we reply to the letters that we get, our tendency as therapists is to reply in a microscopic way, usually. What that means is I'm usually replying to exactly what that person wrote, their very specific situation as best as they were able to describe it, and trying to imagine the world through their shoes. Whenever Nick and I really do sessions with real people, a lot of it is us asking questions, a lot of questions, and learning and learning and learning and learning and learning. And if we have any advice or any feedback, it's usually very little, and it's usually at the very end. And we usually get like a solid hour to really grill and ask from every single dimension and every single perspective what's going on. Obviously, on the show, we don't get to do that. But what I think is important for everybody to understand is that whenever I give feedback, I'm often considering it from that person's perspective intrinsically. And I'm not trying to give feedback and say this is how all people should behave everywhere as some kind of like Kantian categorical imperative. I'm saying this is what I think this person might be able to do. So last week we had a listener that wrote in and said, hey, guy at the gym is a friend of mine. I like him. We're friends. And he is a little flirtatious. And I want to say no, but it was very important to her to not lose the friendship. So my advice to her was, a mistake that you might make is putting this person on blast and being overly aggressive. I didn't want to see her do that because I didn't think it was going to get her to the goal that she wanted. And that's why my advice was specific. I wasn't saying all women everywhere should never, ever, ever press down the gas pedal and really push the message through. Sometimes you have to do that. But I also want your response to be proportionate to what you're sensing in the situation, right? Because you're humans, and I want you to have a nuanced and complex view of reality. So there's that. But the other piece about negging, it's funny because yesterday, Nick and I were having lunch, and I told you about this letter, and I said, dude, I knew that negging thing was going to come back to haunt me. And it did. So I'm going to take a lump on that.
I knew it when you said it.
You knew it was going to, yeah. So back in the early days of the show, which, by the way, nobody should ever listen to episodes, I think, 1 through, what are we at, 37?
Yeah,
1 through 36. Yeah. This is where you should start. Everything else doesn't exist. It's a prequel. But no, it's true. But no, episode 9, it was early in the game, and I was sort of, I think, still learning how to hone my therapist voice in this context when I can't see a patient in front of me. So I was kind of giving dating advice and saying, hey, negging is something that works, and I was just sort of being playful, and you're right. I'm going to just take my lumps on that kind of advice can be problematic and manipulative. And, yep, I'm just going to take it. So I'm just going to take that lump. Good. But that's my reply.
I like that, though. Thank you, Ulrich, for writing in. Because I really...
Makes me a better person.
This is something that I truly believe in. No idea is above criticism.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, too.
I totally believe that. I don't like the idea of sacred cows that we can't talk about or that are too touchy that we can't address. So
it's fair. And I got to tell you, I am extremely flattered that we have listeners like this who... have gone through the grueling and sad experience of listening to all the episodes.
And then being able to cite old episodes.
And only one. And to only have one that they're like, hey, I have beef with this. Like, you know what? That's actually extremely generous.
I don't even remember what episode 36 was about.
Yeah. And I was here. Yeah. So that wasn't the only letter we got this week. We also got one from our pen pal from Brazil. She usually gives us some feedback after episodes, but there were some clips out of this one that I wanted to read as well. So this is from Manuela Muzakio from Brazil. I nailed that. I actually wrote it phonetically this time. She wrote this. I tend to agree, and this is also about the how to deal with people that are interested in you, that you're not interested in them. She said, I tend to agree with being direct. Just say you're not interested. Women are nice, and people are always interpreting that as being flirtatious. The difference is that women understand the concept of no, and men think it's a challenge. Jim said it right. That's what men do, and that needs to stop. The thing is, women are basically trained to be nice all the time, and men just don't seem to be able to grasp the concept that the world does not revolve around them, and not every female is available to them. Men don't know how to deal with rejection. We've been observing this more and more lately, and women are blamed for it all the time. Whether you know this on a conscious level or not, if you are a woman, you certainly understand the expectations of society. You know you're not supposed to be rude or cause problems or make people upset. We carry around this weird obligation to be polite even to people that don't deserve our attention, and we don't realize it. We take it as a natural behavior. This means we are often finding ourselves in uncomfortable situations and not knowing how to get out of it. Because again, we can't hurt other people's feelings. We blame ourselves. We need to remember we do not owe anything to a random guy who seems to be interested. By the way, Jim, you're on fire this week. When you said the feminist in me, I sent you a telepathic hug. Thanks, Manu. Appreciate you. But that's really good. I loved her feedback, Nick, because I think that that's something that you and I don't innately see, which is the burden of how women feel in society, that perhaps they have to be polite and they have to be kind, and it's really, really rude to be, like rejecting or pushing people away. And that's a factor that we didn't think about whenever we were giving our advice. So, really good feedback.
Thank you. All right, and moving on to our Patreons, we want to send a thank you to our new Therapals.
Yeah.
Stacy Coleman, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Frozen 49th Scoop, all who gave us $1 for who joined at $1 a month level, except for Robert Paulson, who gave $2 a month.
What?
Show off.
Show off. It's so funny because when I saw that, I was like, his name is Robert Paulson. You ever watch Fight Club? It's like a chant in Fight Club. His name was Robert Paulson.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, watch Fight Club. Yeah. But yeah, somehow he figured out how to make it give $2. So good job,
Rob. That's cool. All right. Well, thank you very much. We also want to raise our glass to our second Theraproducer.
Yes.
Jake Schneider.
Jake Schneider.
Who's giving at the $20 a month level. And
No.
What?
He's giving at $20 and 1 cent. He raised it a penny. And I think he's creating a trend now where it's going to be like an auction. And so we're only allowed to have 8 theraproducers. That's how many we've created. And so it'd be funny if the next